One of the world's most famous pop culture icons, Spider-Man is back in theaters and is already tracking to make almost $1 billion in its opening weekend. The first half of this review for Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to be completely spoiler free, so if you haven't seen the movie, no worries, no need to click off. I'll let you know and have big warnings before I get into any spoiler territory or anything major that happens in the film. But for now, let's get into the review and talk about spoiler free what I thought about it. For the premise of the film, this takes place 4 years after Spider Man No Way Home, which ended with Peter Parker being forgotten by everyone who knows him in order to save his universe and stop any more multiversal enemies coming through. In doing that, his girlfriend MJ and best friend Ned forgot who he was. And this movie picks up 4 years after the fact and shows that he's really struggling with that fact. And he's focused way too much on his time as Spider Man and hasn't put any time into balance Spider Man and Peter Parker. Throughout this film, he starts to, grow and get a lot of psychological and even physical damage from the fact that he's been isolating himself and he's only been focusing on Spider-Man, and it's really been taking a toll on his physical, his mental, his emotional, everything about him is being affected by this decision from him. Also throughout the film, he starts to really struggle with, 4 years after the fact, he still misses MJ, he still misses Ned. Obviously, he still misses his Aunt May, and he really, goes back and forth throughout this movie whether to get back closer to MJ and Ned, tell them, what he was supposed to tell them at the end of No Way Home, tell them who he is, or continue to keep it a secret in hopes of protecting them. My personal favorite part about this movie is that it felt like a comic book just being slapped onto the screen. In my opinion, one of the best uses of this idea ever done. It didn't feel like a comic book adapted to film. It felt like just playing a comic book on the big screen. There were so many great storylines and characters, and everything meshed together and got a little overclogged at points, but that's how comic books usually are. So it felt like a lot like that. It didn't feel like, they were trying to dumb it down for a movie, but it felt perfect. It felt Spider-Man. But throughout the movie, he's teaming up with other characters, other heroes, running into different characters in his rogues gallery, different villains, and it just feels like purely, so comic-y, and everything going on in Marvel's New York with, other superheroes there, other villains there, different organizations, and everything that the MCU's been through in their New York over the past 18 years now. To get into the performances, I have five main performances down, that, obvious characters and cast that have been announced associated with this movie. The first of those performances being our lead, Tom Holland, reprising his role as Peter Parker and Spider Man, now for his seventh entry, his seventh live action film adaptation of Peter Parker, and he was great in this. I think No Way Home set a very high bar in terms of emotional acting and just, growth on his character that he was able to add. I think this picked up great from there, showed a whole new side of Spider Man, and he was fantastic. I loved, the dynamic that he focused way too much on Spider Man and not enough on Peter Parker. And I thought Tom Holland was great. I'm excited to see, what more he continues to grow with the character and, where he takes it from here. And I love that he had such a big role in the story and the cut of the film that got released that we got to see. And I think he's really, taking over a lot, standing up for comic accuracy and the character and everything. Zendaya also returns in her fourth MCU movie as MJ. I thought she was great in this, as shown in the trailers, living with Ned now after they've graduated from MIT, and she has a lot of scenes with Spider-Man, and I thought she was really good. I know Zendaya had said something that, in the original cut, or the original script, MJ felt like a different character and wasn't, the weird stuff that she was in the other movies. So I like that, that was meshed in, and she had a lot of great emotional scenes, emotional moments. Also a great summer for her, piggybacking off of the Odyssey. Jacob Batalon as Ned. Ned Leeds. I thought he was really fun. He wasn't in it too much, but the scenes he had were great. Peter's keeping up with them through social media, and I thought a lot of those video clips were so funny. I thought Ned was great. I'm really excited to see, how Ned continues to be a character and where they take him from here. Sadie Sink, the, mystery surprise character of the movie. I will not spoil who she plays just yet, but I thought she had a great performance, very emotional, had a great flashback scene, had a ton of great emotion towards the end, towards the middle. Very great scenes, great acting, really, really great, and probably her first, big blockbuster role. I'm very excited to see her return to the MCU as she's already been confirmed, months ago to be appearing in Avengers Secret Wars and also, the other roles she's going to get from here. My last and fifth, main performance I'm going to talk about John Bernthal, one of my favorite. Talked about him the other day in my Odyssey review. Have always loved him as the Punisher, and I know, his character, the version of the character he plays, isn't completely comic accurate, and he takes a lot of changes, a lot of liberties with that. But I've always been a big fan of John Bernthal. Love watching him in interviews, especially a lot of the press around this movie. And I thought this was some of the best Frank Castle we've ever seen. He was hilarious, great comic relief. I thought he really pushed the PG-13 rating, putting Frank Castle in a PG-13 sense, trying to tone down his language as much as possible. I thought they really pushed it. I didn't think that much was allowed in a PG-13 movie, but I thought he was great. His action was great. His characterization and him connecting with other characters in Marvel outside of, the Netflix universe. I thought him and Spider-Man have a great relationship now, and I'm really excited to hopefully see that return. My last part of the spoiler-free part, the message of the movie. I really love the message that, it leaves the viewer with, accepting that, your life is going to change and things get hard. But they're only as hard as you make them, and they're only harder when you're alone and you don't, bring others around you and accept that you need help. So we get a lot of that with Peter's character and the character that Sadie Sink ends up playing, just about not struggling alone, not battling alone. I really like that aspect of this Spider-Man story. I'm going to get into spoilers now. So if you have not seen the movie and do not want to be spoiled, please click off and hopefully come back later. But I'm going to get into spoilers and a quick synopsis of the story. Obviously we pick up and it's 4 years after No Way Home, and Peter's, reminiscing on what he's been up to in those 4 years. I loved some of the small villains we get to see there. Tarantula and Boomerang. I really thought they'd have a few more scenes in this, but the scenes we see of them in the trailer is all we really get from them. But I thought it was cool. I thought all of the comic panel recreation was great. Loved seeing all that, especially one at the end, which I will get to later. Yes, Spider-Man being brought into the main plot with Sadie Sink's character trying to stop the tank. I thought that was a great action scene. I remember, around this time last year when those set photos got leaked in Germany, I believe they were in, when they shot this, in the street with the tank, with Tom Holland actually swinging from a crane. Great scene as, the tank is breaking into the DODC. And after that, Peter starts to struggle with his DNA. And because he's been isolating himself, his spider DNA starts to bring him into the next life cycle because of how much he's isolated himself and kept to himself and focused way too much on this one aspect of his life. It starts to mutate and he starts to struggle with that. His senses are heightened a lot and he develops natural web fluid, similar to Tobey Maguire's adaptation of Spider-Man. So he struggles a lot with those changes while still, trying to help New York. And he's working with a new character, Detective Jean DeWolf, played by an actress that I love so much in her role as Tina in The Bear. Love seeing her show up in this. And, later on, he goes and reunites with MJ, saves MJ because of this telepathic character who seems to be after her now. Just going to, speed through the plot here. He goes to save MJ and has a really good heartfelt moment on the rooftop with her, which takes, a very dark twist as she is being telepathically controlled. And then he goes to Frank for help again. And, great scenes there. A lot of, down to earth between Spider-Man and MJ, Spider-Man and Frank, MJ and Frank. Loved all of that. And then Spider-Man goes to the DODC building to hopefully stop from killing William Metzger, referred to as Bill Metzger in this, who in the comics plays a big anti-mutant advocate who is the head of the DODC in this, the Department of Damage Control, who Sadie Sink's character, who is now revealed to be Jean Grey, our first mainline MCU timeline mutant and main X-Men character who is now in the MCU, who is, looking for some kind of substance and material that she believes the DODC is holding on to. And Jean takes over. Bruce Banner, the Hulk, who Peter had met with earlier, talking about mutating genes and genomes. And I loved seeing him return here as Bruce, also as Smart Hulk. I thought that was, a great, tie-in and mesh up of, all of Bruce Banner that we get here before he finally turns into, our Raging Savage Hulk. I was slightly disappointed at first. Part of me, was hoping we get a full gray Hulk. I felt like they skirted the line a little bit of that too much. Wish, they would have just gone full bright green Hulk, but I thought he was good, and I loved that. Um, they gave the small moment of, I believe, Hulk remembered Peter, and that's why, he slowed down and stopped and gave himself up. But now after this, the DODC has taken Jean Grey captive, and Spidey believes, at first that she's the villain and, that's what had to happen. It turns out, obviously, Damage Control are the villains, and they're torturing Jean, trying to find out more about her powers and experiment on her, and torture her and find out all of this, as Jean is reliving her past, as Damage Control captured her sister, who was also a telepath, and has now killed her. Before Jean fully, embraces her power and breaks free and is ready to kill Bill Metzger, before Peter gets there and talks her down, and she finally is able to get into Peter's head, has a great moment of Jean and Aunt May, talking about, the main message of this film, and, knowing that it's going to be okay and things are going to be hard. Jean, while this is going on, has about a kilometer outside of the jail that they're inside, everyone frozen. She's, taking over the minds of everyone. Frank, seeing that this needs to be stopped, has, his sniper set up ready to take her out. And while they're in this mindscape in Peter's head, Peter's Spidey sense comes through and allows him to jump out and save Jean and take the bullet for her. And from this, Frank realizes he messed up, and rushes Peter to the hospital as we near the end of the film. And I'm going to flash it on screen now, but it recreated one of my favorite comic panels of all time of Frank Castle carrying a dying Peter Parker into the hospital. I love that they recreated that panel. I thought that was beautiful. And they have a very sad monologue of New York newscast, fearing that they're going to lose Spider-Man. And now outside of the hospital, so many civilians and people are rallying, showing their support for Spider-Man, as the movie ends off there with Spider-Man, finally having a chance to reconnect with MJ and Ned, even though MJ doesn't remember him, and the person that loved Spider-Man isn't there anymore. That's not who she is. But Ned and Peter, as the movie ends off, finally reconnect and do their classic handshake that just came as a second nature for Ned. There's my, brief and messy run through of the plot. But I want to get into the characters. Obviously, I talked about Peter earlier. He struggles a lot in this movie, focusing way too much on Spider-Man and not enough of Peter. And he struggles with MJ not knowing who he is, and whoever the MJ that knew him was isn't who MJ is anymore, and she doesn't love Peter anymore. Very hard scene there, and MJ has grown a lot, but she still has her great moral conscience, and she still wants to do good in the world and look out for Ned. Ned also not remembering Spider-Man, but knowing, that Spider-Man is in their past, but he doesn't remember who he is, has become fascinated with Spider-Man and has created the Spidey Tracker app. I thought he was great in this. I thought he was funny. Jean Grey, fantastic in this movie. Introduction to the MCU. Sadie Sink was great. She has a great flashback scene with her sister and a great emotional scene in the DODC, which I thought was fantastic. And the scene of her hopping from mind to mind, I thought they played her a little too villainous in this, but from the perspective of a mutant who's being hunted, who already has everything taken from them, I liked it. I think it makes sense. It's a realistic take on what would happen, and I'm really excited to see her come back, see her return, and the eventual X-Men movie, as well as Secret Wars. We end off her story in this as she's taking a bus, to what is presumably upstate New York, also presumably finding Charles Institute of Gifted Youngsters, which we don't know if that's established in this world yet, but I think it's safe to assume that's where she's headed. Punisher, Frank Castle, really great again in this PG-13 sense. Really talks about where he's come from in Punisher One Last Kill that came out earlier this year, and how he's, readopted the Punisher mantle, and he sees it, as a job, as something he's called to do, forced to do, something he didn't sign up for. Bruce Banner in this again is great. Has a lot of great scenes about when he's a professor earlier in the movie, talking about the Hulk, and who gets to choose what part of your DNA or nature is good or bad, before he ends up hulking out later in the movie, and by the end is carted off into a mental institute. So I'm interested to see what they do with him, when they bring his character back. But I do like that he is left having to pick up the pieces, and all the mental work he's done to separate Banner and Hulk is kind of destroyed. So we get to really go through with him now in the future, how he's going to pick those pieces up, how he's going to fix that. Bill Metzger, I thought, was a good character. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff with the DODC. They had Shocker's old gauntlets. They now employ the Hand, which was interesting. They were really seen as just a group of ninjas in this, not as much of the lore we already have for the Hand. But he did mention, he just said, hardworking kids that don't have a leader anymore, they don't have a purpose anymore. So he employs them, and Peter has a great fight with them towards the end of the movie. A lot of great camera work done in that and the Hulk battle, which I loved. But I'm excited for Metzger to come back, and it looks like he'll be, a foe for the X-Men going forwards, and a foe for a lot of street level MCU. Scorpion, finally, since Spider-Man Homecoming, Michael Mando is back playing Mac Gargan, and the Scorpion. I thought he had a couple of great scenes. I think his costume was amazing. I love the way they brought that tail into live action. I thought the costumes were amazing. This movie, Punisher, good costume, obviously. Jean Grey, no comic book costume, but I thought, her costume was good. Spider-Man, amazing costume. One of the best live action superhero suits I think we've ever seen. An actual, real, in person, real life costume that he wore, no CGI. I thought was amazing. And then, Detective Gene DeWolf works alongside Spider-Man through, his connection in the police and the government, trying to stop all these crimes. I thought she was great. Really great addition to the movie. I think, some smaller characters now, additional spoiler warning, some characters that pop up. Yelena, Florence Pugh comes back to play Yelena in this. She has a lot more scenes than I thought she would have had. We get a lot more info on the new Avengers and what kind of threats they're taking on now. And that, Spider-Man is stuck taking some of these lower level threats. But we see Yelena a couple times in the movie, and I thought she had some really funny scenes. And it was great world building. Again, when I was talking about comic characters showing up, it being like a comic book, I love, that she showed up, and it makes the world feel lived in. Tombstone also shows up. Loved him showing up. I wish he was in more of it. I, really wish he had a bigger role in the story, but he had a really cool scene. Loved, the way they brought him to live action. Sheila Rivera also shows up, reprising her role from Daredevil Born Again as the new mayor of New York City. Love seeing her show up. What's next? I'm excited to see Spider-Man return. We get a post-credit scene showing the spider tracker, and then it pops up saying location unknown and brings his location into space, which I took to mean that he is now transported into Battle World, assuming the post-credit scene takes place a little after the movie ended. We don't know for sure if he's going to be in Avengers Doomsday. I would assume he shows up post-credit scene or towards the end. I'm almost positive he's going to show up in Secret Wars, so I assume that's what is next for Peter. I'm almost positive we're going to see MJ and Ned again in Spider-Man 5 once we get that, as well as Punisher, hopefully in next season of Daredevil Born Again. Bruce Banner hopefully back in Avengers. Jean will also be back in Avengers and the new X-Men film led by Jake Schreier. I'm very excited for. What's next? I think this was a great film. To have right before Avengers Doomsday, give us a great grounded Spider-Man movie before shaking things up with the multiverse in a big, long time coming next Avengers movie. Overall thoughts and ratings. I love this movie. I thought, it just felt like a comic book slapped on the screen, and I love that. I thought the colors were amazing. I thought the cinematography was amazing. A lot of the film tricks they used. There was a scene fighting the Hand where the camera just flipped with Peter, which I thought was really cool. So much of that was incredible. All the characters in this were great. I thought it got a little stuffed at times with so many plot points going on. Gene's character feeling a little too villainous and dark at points, but other than that, I love this movie. No notes. I think I've been struggling with the idea of it, but I think it's Tom Holland's best Spider-Man movie in my opinion. It is probably one of, if not the best live action Spider-Man movie we have ever gotten. Its ratings are off the charts right now. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at a 92 critic score and a 98 fan score. Letterboxd has it as a 4.2 average. IMDb also has it an 8.2 out of 10. Incredibly high rating there. Me personally, I give it a 5 stars out of 5. Very few notes, very emotional, very entertaining, very powerful movie. Great, grounded Spider-Man with so many great characters in it. I thought there wasn't a weak point in any of the characters. Very few notes. I think strengths were, everything I just talked about: cinematography, colors, characters. Music was good in it. Weaknesses, maybe a little overstuffed. Maybe not enough time to flesh out Jean Grey in parts, or to flesh out the Hulk at some points. But other than that, not much to say. Again, 5 stars out of 5 from me. Yeah, I hope you guys also enjoyed Spider-Man Brand New Day, and I hope you guys get a chance to see it if you haven't already, sometime this weekend or in the coming weeks. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie. Let me know what you guys thought of this video down in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate it all, of course. And let me know what you guys want to see from me next. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you.